The vast control room of the Galactic Confederation Outpost 7 buzzed with activity. Technicians moved between screens and officers spoke in hushed tones. At the center of it all stood Admiral Vex, his 4 eyes narrowed at the main display screen. "Report," he commanded. Officer Tull cleared his throat. "Sir, long-range scanners have detected an unregistered fleet at the edge of Sector 12. They entered our territory approximately 6 hours ago." "Composition? Origin?" Admiral Vex asked, his voice carrying across the room. "Unknown, sir, but based on their engine signatures and vessel size, they appear to be." Tull hesitated, checking his readings again. "Sir, they're quite primitive. And small." Admiral Vex moved to the scanner station. The display showed 12 dots moving in perfect formation. Each vessel was barely 1/5 the size of a standard Confederation cruiser. "Interesting," he murmured. "Have they responded to standard hailing protocols?" "No, sir, but they haven't adjusted course either. They continue on their current trajectory towards Centauri Station." From across the room came a loud, rumbling laugh. Admiral Krell of the Valaxian Empire, the largest military force in the Confederation, approached with his characteristic swagger. His thick hide gleamed under the control room lights. "Is this what has the great Admiral Vex concerned? A collection of toys?" Krell laughed again, pointing at the display. "Look at the size of those vessels. My personal yacht is larger than their flagship." Vex didn't respond immediately. In his 300 years of service, he had learned that size wasn't everything. "We don't know who they are, Krell. Caution is prudent." "Caution," Krell scoffed. "For that tiny fleet of insignificant vessels, they're probably some lost colony, finally figuring out how to achieve space travel. Nevertheless, we should follow protocol," Vex insisted. "Officer Tull, send the standard warning message in all known languages." Tull nodded and began the transmission. The message was simple. "This is Galactic Confederation territory. Identify yourselves immediately or change course." The control room fell silent as they waited. Minutes passed. "Nothing, sir," Tull reported. Krell smirked. "As I expected. They probably don't even have proper communication systems." Just as the words left his mouth, the main communication panel lit up. "Incoming transmission, sir," Tull announced, surprise evident in his voice. "Audio and visual." "On screen," Vex ordered. The main display flickered, and then an image appeared. A being with pale skin, 2 eyes, and strange fur on top of its head looked back at them. It wore a dark uniform with unfamiliar markings. "This is Captain James Miller of the Earth Defense Force," the being said in perfect galactic standard, shocking everyone in the room. "We come in peace and seek diplomatic relations with the Galactic Confederation." Silence filled the control room. The being's accent was unusual but clearly understandable. "How do they know our language?" whispered an officer. Admiral Krell's smug expression faltered. "Earth? I've never heard of it." Vex stepped forward. "I am Admiral Vex of the Galactic Confederation. Your fleet has entered our territory without authorization." Captain Miller nodded respectfully. "We apologize for any concern we've caused. We discovered your communication frequencies several months ago and have been learning your language since then. We hope to establish peaceful contact." "Your vessels are..." Vex paused, searching for a diplomatic term, "unlike our standard designs." Miller smiled. "Yes, we've noticed the difference in our approach to shipbuilding. We would be happy to exchange technological information as part of diplomatic relations." Krell pushed forward. "Your tiny ships are hardly worth our attention. What could humans possibly offer the Confederation?" If Miller was offended, he didn't show it. Instead, his smile widened slightly. "I suppose that remains to be seen, Admiral," he replied calmly. "But in my experience, it's unwise to judge a species by the size of their ships." Centauri Station hung like a giant metal spider in the darkness of space. Its 8 massive arms extended outward from a central hub, each one housing different sections of the Galactic Confederation's diplomatic headquarters. Ships of various sizes and designs docked along these arms, representing over 30 different species. And then there were the human ships. They looked like toys next to the Valaxian cruisers, muttered Delegate Gorn, adjusting his ceremonial robes as he stood in the grand reception hall. Representatives from all major Confederation species had gathered for this historic first meeting. "Size isn't everything," replied Delegate Pax, her blue skin shimmering under the bright lights. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports. These humans developed faster than light travel independently. That alone deserves respect." Gorn grunted. "Admiral Krell says their technology is at least 2 centuries behind ours." The chamber doors slid open before Pax could respond. The human delegation entered, led by Captain James Miller. 5 other humans followed him, each wearing the same dark uniform with different colored bands on their shoulders. The gathered aliens fell quiet, many seeing humans in person for the first time. The humans were shorter than most species present, with no obvious natural defenses, no claws, armored skin, or enhanced musculature. They appeared almost fragile compared to beings like the Valaxians. Yet they walked with unexpected confidence. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I thank you for this opportunity," Captain Miller began, his voice carrying throughout the chamber without any amplification device. "We are honored to stand among the stars alongside such distinguished species." High Chancellor Zool stepped forward, his massive form towering over Miller. "The Confederation welcomes all peaceful species, though I must say your arrival was unexpected." Miller smiled. Humanity has always had a knack for surprising others. As the formal introductions continued, Admiral Krell watched from the edge of the chamber, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He leaned toward his aide. "I want detailed scans of their vessels. There must be something we're missing." "Sir, we would need permission for internal scans," the aide replied nervously. "Then get permission," Krell hissed. "Offer them a tour of our science facilities. While they're distracted, we'll examine their ships." Across the room, a human woman with the name Taylor on her uniform was speaking with several alien engineers. Her hands moved animatedly as she described Earth's approach to fusion technology. "Our energy density ratio is quite different from yours," she explained. "We focused on efficiency rather than raw power output." "Fascinating," replied the chief Tellurian engineer, his antennae twitching with interest. "But surely such small reactors limit your vessel's capabilities." Taylor smiled. "We find ways to compensate." Meanwhile, Captain Miller had moved to a large viewing window that overlooked the docking bay. Chancellor Zool joined him, following his gaze to the human ships. "Your vessels are compact," Zool observed diplomatically. "We call that flagship the Intrepid," Miller said, pointing to the largest human ship. Though still small by Confederation standards, it had an elegant design with smooth lines and an unusual configuration of engines. "May I ask why you chose such a design path?" Zool inquired. "Most species begin with larger vessels." Miller turned to face the Chancellor, his expression thoughtful. "Humans learned early in our history that bigger isn't always better. Adaptability often matters more than size." Across the reception hall, one of the humans, a man named Davis, was engaged in conversation with a group of Valaxian officers who couldn't hide their amusement. "So your entire fleet consists of just 12 vessels?" one officer asked, struggling to keep his tone respectful. Davis nodded calmly. "For now, we're still assessing our needs." The officers exchanged glances. One snorted quietly. "Don't worry," he said, patting Davis on the shoulder with a massive hand. "The Confederation has thousands of ships. We can protect your kind." Davis smiled politely, but his eyes remained serious. "That's very generous. However, humans have always preferred to protect themselves." In the shadows of the reception hall, a junior Tellurian scientist named Nix observed the exchanges with growing concern. Unlike his colleagues, he had noticed something about the human ships, something in their design that didn't make sense. Unless His antennae quivered as a troubling thought occurred to him. These humans might be far more than they appeared to be. The Confederation engineering bay buzzed with activity as a team of the galaxy's finest technical minds circled the human shuttle. Captain Miller had granted permission for a basic examination of one of their smaller vessels, a gesture of goodwill that Admiral Krell was quick to exploit. "Primitive hull material," muttered Chief Engineer Drav, running his six-fingered hand along the shuttle's exterior. "Some kind of carbon composite. Nothing special." Beside him, junior scientist Nix remained silent, his antennae twitching nervously as he recorded measurements. Something about the ship's design continued to bother him, though he couldn't quite identify what. "Check the propulsion system," ordered Krell, who had insisted on overseeing the examination personally. "I want to know how these humans manage faster-than-light travel with such limited technology." Two engineers removed an access panel, revealing a compact engine system unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the standard plasma drives used throughout the Confederation, the human engine contained a series of interlocking rings surrounding a small pulsing core. "What is this?" Drav asked, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. The human engineer, Officer Reed, smiled. "That's our quantum displacement drive. Compact, efficient, and remarkably powerful for its size." "Impossible," Krell snorted. "A drive this small couldn't power a ship through hyperspace." Reed shrugged. "Yet here we are, several light years from Earth." Drav leaned closer, his scanner hovering over the engine core. "The energy readings are unusual. This technology follows a completely different development path than our own." "Humans often take the road less traveled," Reed replied casually. Across the bay, another team examined the shuttle's weapon systems, or what appeared to be weapon systems. The ports were oddly configured, with multiple connections leading back to the central power grid. "These aren't conventional weapons," reported a Valaxian weapons specialist. "They seem to be some kind of modular attachment points." Krell pushed his way through the engineers. "What do you mean, attachment points?" "See these connection ports." The specialist pointed to a series of interlocking mechanisms. "They're designed to connect to something else. But they're not just power connections. They have data integration systems too." Reed watched from a distance, his face revealing nothing. Nix had moved to the shuttle's navigation system, his slender fingers tapping through the interface. What he found made him freeze. "Chief," he called softly, "you should see this." Drav joined him, followed by Krell. The navigation display showed a star map, but with curious markings throughout Confederation space. "They've mapped our entire territory," Drav whispered, "including several classified outposts." Reed appeared at their side. "Just standard reconnaissance. We like to know the neighborhood before moving in." Krell's eyes narrowed. This level of intelligence gathering would take years. "We're thorough," Reed replied simply. Later, as the engineering team compared notes in the station's secure briefing room, opinions were divided. "Their technology is inconsistent," Drav explained to the assembled officials. "Some systems are indeed primitive, while others are puzzling." "Explain," demanded Chancellor Zool. "Their energy systems are incredibly efficient, more compact than anything we've developed. But their weapons appear underpowered, their hulls too thin for serious combat. It doesn't make sense." Nix, normally quiet during such high-level meetings, cleared his throat. "Chancellor, I believe the human ships are designed with a different philosophy than ours." "What do you mean?" Zool asked. "Our ships are built as complete units. Battleships are battleships. Freighters are freighters. But these human vessels, they seem designed for adaptation, almost as if..." "As if what?" Krell interrupted impatiently. "As if they're components of something larger," Nix finished. Krell laughed loudly. "Listen to yourselves. You're giving these primitives too much credit. Their tiny fleet is nothing more than what we see. A handful of underpowered vessels built by a species new to the stars." Chancellor Zool nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but I studied Earth's brief history since their arrival. They have a saying, Appearances can be deceiving. What they have is irrelevant, Krell declared, standing to address the room. The mighty Valaxian Empire began with ships 10 times the size of these human vessels. Their tiny fleet is an amusement, nothing more. As the meeting continued, Nix returned to his datapad, studying the strange connections he'd found throughout the human shuttle. A pattern was emerging, one that made him increasingly uneasy. Whatever these ships were truly designed for, he suspected the Confederation was about to find out. Alarms blared throughout Centauri Station. Emergency lights pulsed red across walls and ceilings as officers rushed to their stations. In the central command chamber, a massive holographic display showed a distant outpost under attack. "Report," Chancellor Zool demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's the Draxus Collective, sir," a communications officer replied. "They've launched an assault on Outpost Theta 7. The outpost sent a distress signal 12 minutes ago." "Casualties?" Zool asked. "Unknown, but the outpost was recently designated as a human settlement point." The room fell silent for a moment. All eyes turned to Captain Miller, who stood calmly at the edge of the command center. His face remained composed, though his eyes had hardened. "How many Draxus ships?" Miller asked. The officer checked the readings. Sensors detect a battle group of 27 vessels, mostly destroyer class with fighter support. Admiral Krell pushed through the gathering officials to stand before Miller. "Now you see the reality of space, human. The Draxus Collective doesn't respect diplomatic niceties. They test new species with blood." Miller nodded once. "So I see." Chancellor Zool activated the central communication system. "I'm calling an emergency council meeting. The Confederation must decide how to respond to this provocation." Within the hour, representatives from all member species gathered in the Grand Council chamber. The mood was tense as the latest information scrolled across personal data pads. "The attack continues," announced Security Chief Farn. "Our long-range scanners show the human outpost is still holding, but their defenses are failing. Approximately 300 human colonists are stationed there." Captain Miller stood before the council. "The Earth Defense Force requests permission to respond to this attack." Laughter erupted from the Valaxian section. Admiral Krell stepped forward. "With what? Your tiny fleet of 12 vessels against 27 Draxus warships." Krell's voice dripped with mockery. "The Draxus Collective will obliterate your ships within hours. This is a matter for the Confederation fleet." Miller's expression remained unchanged. "We appreciate your concern, Admiral. However, Earth will defend its own." Chancellor Zool raised a hand for silence. "The Draxus Collective has long been a thorn in our side. They respect only power. Captain Miller, are you certain your forces are adequate for this response?" "We are," Miller replied simply. A heated debate erupted among the council members. Some argued for immediate Confederation military intervention. Others insisted the humans needed to handle their own problems if they wanted to be taken seriously. "The tiny human fleet will be obliterated," Krell repeated loudly. "We should send the 3rd Battle Group to deal with this." Miller turned to face the Admiral. "What we need isn't your ships, Admiral. Just information. What tactics do the Draxus typically employ in an assault of this nature?" The question caught Krell off guard. He hesitated before answering. "They use a standard 3-wave attack pattern. Heavy bombardment, followed by fighter sweeps, then boarding parties to secure valuables." Miller nodded, making notes on his datapad. "Thank you." Chancellor Zool studied the human captain carefully. "You seem remarkably calm, Captain, given that your people are under attack." "Panic never won a battle, Chancellor," Miller replied. He turned to address the full council. "The Earth Defense Force will handle this situation. We request only that the Confederation observe and record the engagement for analysis." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The humans' confidence bordered on arrogance or madness. "You want us to watch as your tiny fleet is destroyed?" Krell asked incredulously. I want you to watch what happens when someone attacks humans, Miller corrected, his voice carrying a quiet intensity that silenced the room. It will be educational. Chancellor Zool considered for a moment before nodding. Very well. The Confederation will monitor the situation but not intervene unless requested. We will dispatch observation vessels to record the engagement. As the council session ended, Admiral Krell approached Miller in the corridor. Your bravery is admirable, human, but misplaced, he said. When your ships start exploding, don't hesitate to call for real help. Miller's eyes met Krell's. Admiral, there's something you should understand about humans. We don't build things without a purpose. Meaning? Miller smiled slightly. You've been looking at our ships and seeing only what's visible. That's exactly what the Draxus will do too. With that cryptic statement, Miller turned and walked away, leaving a confused admiral staring after him. The observation deck of the Confederation monitoring vessel Vigilant offered a perfect view of the unfolding disaster. Dozens of officials and military officers had gathered to witness what many believed would be the quick destruction of Earth's defense force. Admiral Krell stood at the front, arms crossed over his massive chest. The humans have arrived. Now we'll see how quickly their bravado turns to pleas for help. The main display showed the Draxus battle group, 27 warships arranged in attack formation around the human outpost. The settlement's defensive shields flickered weakly under constant bombardment. Magnify Sector 4, ordered Chancellor Zool, who had insisted on observing personally. The display shifted, revealing the approaching human fleet. All 12 vessels moved in a tight, arrow-shaped formation. Even at this distance, they appeared absurdly small compared to the Draxus destroyers. That's their entire response force? Asked a Tellurian diplomat in disbelief. Nix, who had also secured permission to observe, studied his readings with growing interest. Their energy signatures are fluctuating. That's unusual. They're powering weapons, an officer explained. No, Nix replied quietly. It's something else. On the main display, the Draxus commanders had finally noticed the approaching human ships. 2 massive destroyers broke formation and moved to intercept, their weapon systems charging. And so it begins, Krell said smugly. The first test of humanity in galactic warfare. I give them 3 minutes. The observation deck fell silent as everyone watched. The tiny human ships continued their approach, seemingly oblivious to the danger. Then something unexpected happened. Just as the Draxus destroyers came within firing range, the human formation suddenly split apart. 6 ships veered left, 6 right, moving with a speed and precision that caught everyone by surprise. Such maneuverability, gasped a Valaxian officer. The Draxus destroyers fired, massive energy beams cutting through space and hitting nothing. The human ships had already changed position again, moving in what appeared to be random patterns. They're so fast, someone whispered. The human vessels weren't just evading. They were now weaving between the larger Draxus ships, seemingly untouchable. Small flashes of light erupted from the human ships, targeting specific points on the Draxus vessels. Are those their weapons? Krell asked incredulously. They're like pinpricks. Nix adjusted his scanner. They're not random attacks. They're hitting communication arrays, weapon control systems, and engine regulators. Very precise targeting. On the display, chaos was unfolding. The Draxus commanders, used to fighting conventional battles against conventional foes, couldn't adapt to the humans' unusual tactics. Their massive ships turned slowly, trying to track targets that moved like water through fingers. The humans are using the Draxus ship's size against them, Chancellor Zool observed. A Draxus commander's voice crackled through the communication system. Target the lead human vessel. Ignore the others. But there was no clear leader. Each human ship moved independently yet somehow coordinated perfectly with the others. As the battle continued, the Draxus grew increasingly frustrated. Their superior numbers and firepower meant nothing against enemies they couldn't hit. Look there, called out an observer. 3 human ships had suddenly changed course, heading straight for the Draxus command vessel. The Draxus responded with a barrage of fire that lit up space, and once again hit nothing. The human ships split apart at the last moment, each one skimming along the hull of the massive Draxus ship. "What are they doing?" Krell demanded. Nyx's antennae quivered with excitement. "They're not attacking. They're scanning, testing defenses, learning." Indeed, after that pass, the human tactics shifted. Now when they fired, their shots penetrated shields that had previously deflected them. They adapted their weapons based on a single scan. A Valaxian engineer asked in disbelief. Chancellor Zool turned to Admiral Krell. "It seems you may have underestimated our new friends, Admiral." Krell didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the display where the supposedly inferior human fleet was systematically dismantling the Draxus formation. Not with overwhelming force, but with speed, precision, and coordination unlike anything the Confederation had seen before. "This is impossible," he finally whispered. But as the first Draxus ship lost power and drifted helplessly, everyone on the observation deck knew they were witnessing something that would change galactic warfare forever. And the battle had only just begun. Commander Vax reports his ship is losing shield power. The panicked voice of a Draxus officer crackled through the observation deck's communication system. "We can't target these human vessels. They move too quickly." On the main display, the battle had descended into chaos, but only for one side. The Draxus fleet's neat formation had completely broken down. Several of their ships drifted with damaged engines, while others fired wildly at targets that were never where they aimed. The human vessels, meanwhile, moved with perfect coordination. Their seemingly random patterns now revealed themselves as a complex dance, each ship precisely where it needed to be at exactly the right moment. "Magnificent," whispered Nyx, no longer trying to hide his admiration. Admiral Krell scowled. "They're just lucky. The Draxus commanders are incompetent." "Are they?" Chancellor Zool asked quietly. "Or are we witnessing something entirely new?" The observation deck fell silent as the human ships suddenly broke off their attack. All 12 vessels pulled away from the Draxus fleet, regrouping at a safe distance. "What are they doing?" someone asked. "They had the advantage." Nyx's antennae quivered. "The energy signatures are changing again, more dramatically this time." On the main screen, Captain Miller's face appeared. He looked calm, almost serene, despite the battle raging behind him. "Confederation observers," Miller said, "what you've seen so far is how humans fight when outmatched. Now, I'd like to show you how we fight when we choose not to be." The transmission cut off. All eyes returned to the battle display. The 12 human ships had arranged themselves in an unusual formation. 4 groups of 3 vessels, each group forming a triangle. Slowly, impossibly, the ships in each group began moving toward each other. "They're going to collide," a Valaxian officer exclaimed. But they didn't collide. As the ships drew together, seams appeared along their hulls. Sections slid apart, rotated, and reconnected. The strange attachment points that had puzzled the Confederation engineers now made perfect sense. "They're combining," Nyx said, his voice filled with wonder. Where 12 small ships had been, 4 larger vessels now took shape. Each was larger than a standard Confederation cruiser, with weapons systems that had been hidden within the smaller components now fully deployed. The observation deck erupted in shocked exclamations. "Impossible. How did we miss this? The ships are modular." Admiral Krell stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. "This can't be real." On the screen, the newly formed human ships powered up weapons systems that dwarfed anything they had shown before. The lead vessel opened fire on a Draxus destroyer. A beam of concentrated energy tore through the destroyer's shields like they weren't even there. The massive ship split in half, secondary explosions rippling along its length. "By the stars," Chancellor Zool breathed. The remaining Draxus ships attempted to regroup, but it was too late. The human vessels moved with the same coordination as before, but now with devastating firepower. 3 more Draxus ships fell in quick succession. The modular design, Nix explained, his words tumbling out excitedly. That's why their smaller ships seemed underpowered. They weren't complete vessels. They were components of these larger battleships. The Draxus commander's desperate voice came through again. Fall back. All ships, retreat immediately. These aren't normal ships. They're demons. But the retreat came too late. The human vessels systematically disabled the remaining Draxus ships, targeting engines and weapons with surgical precision. They could destroy them all, observed Chancellor Zool, but they're choosing to disable rather than annihilate. Admiral Krell finally found his voice. A trick. It was all a trick. They let us examine their ships, knowing we'd see only what they wanted us to see. Not a trick, corrected Nix. A different approach to shipbuilding. One we've never considered. On the main display, the battle was effectively over. The 4 combined human ships now surrounded the remaining Draxus vessels, which had powered down their weapons in surrender. Captain Miller's face appeared on screen again. Chancellor Zool, the threat to our outpost has been neutralized. We request Confederation assistance in processing prisoners. Chancellor Zool stepped forward. Of course, Captain Miller. And may I say, that was quite the revelation. Miller smiled slightly. We believe in being prepared, Chancellor. And sometimes, the best way to win a fight is to change the rules of engagement. As the transmission ended, every official on the observation deck knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. 1 month after the battle with the Draxus Collective, the Grand Assembly Hall of Centauri Station buzzed with excitement. Representatives from every Confederation species had gathered for what many were calling the most significant diplomatic event in recent history. The massive doors swung open, and Captain James Miller entered, flanked by his crew. Unlike previous appearances where they had worn simple uniforms, today the humans were dressed in ceremonial attire, deep blue with gold trim, medals gleaming on their chests. Chancellor Zool stepped forward to meet them. Captain Miller, on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I welcome you and your people as full members of our coalition. Applause filled the hall, though some clapped more enthusiastically than others. Admiral Krell stood at the back, his expression a careful mask that failed to hide his discomfort. Thank you, Chancellor, Miller replied. Earth is honored to join the community of spacefaring civilizations. After the formal ceremony concluded, the gathering shifted to a more relaxed reception. Officials from various worlds clustered around the humans, asking questions about their technology and culture. Is it true that all your ships can reconfigure? Asked a wide-eyed Tellurian diplomat. Officer Taylor smiled. Not all. But modular design is a cornerstone of our approach to space travel. Why build specialized ships when you can have vessels that adapt to any situation? Across the room, Nix had cornered Engineer Reed with a datapad full of technical questions. The energy transfer during reconfiguration should cause massive power losses, but your systems show no such inefficiency. How? Reed laughed. You're thinking linearly. Our power systems are designed to benefit from reconfiguration. Each connection point creates a resonance effect that actually increases output. Meanwhile, Chancellor Zool and Captain Miller stood by a large viewing window, watching ships move through the busy space lanes around the station. The Draxus Collective has been unusually quiet since your demonstration, Zool observed. Miller nodded. They learned what others will soon discover. Humans don't appreciate being underestimated. Indeed. Though I must ask, why the deception? Why not simply reveal your ship's capabilities from the beginning? Miller turned from the window. Chancellor, throughout human history, we've learned a valuable lesson. Showing your full strength immediately often leads to unnecessary conflict. We preferred to be judged as harmless until proven otherwise. A clever strategy, Zool acknowledged. Though Admiral Krell feels manipulated. As he should, Miller replied with a slight smile. His assumptions about our tiny fleet nearly cost lives. Across the reception hall, Admiral Krell finally approached Officer Davis, who had been the target of his mockery weeks earlier. "Your modular vessels are impressive," Krell admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. The Valaxian Empire would be interested in a technology exchange. Davis nodded politely. "I'll relay your interest to our leadership, though I should mention, what you saw was just our first-generation modular fleet." Krell's eyes widened. First generation. Of course, the ships arriving next month are considerably more advanced. Davis sipped his drink calmly, enjoying the shock on the Admiral's face. By the large display screen at the center of the hall, Chancellor Zool had called for attention. The screen lit up with images of Earth. "As part of our new alliance, I'm pleased to announce that a Confederation delegation will visit humanity's homeworld next month," Zool announced. "We look forward to learning more about the species that has so thoroughly surprised us all." Applause filled the room again. Even Admiral Krell joined in this time, his previous arrogance replaced by a newfound respect, and perhaps a touch of fear. As the reception continued, a phrase passed from one alien group to another, whispered with a mixture of awe and amusement: "Never underestimate a human fleet." Later that evening, Miller stood alone on an observation deck, watching the stars. Nix found him there, holding a data tablet. "Captain," the Tellurian said hesitantly, "I've been analyzing your battle tactics. The way your ships function independently yet act as one. It's unlike anything in our records." Miller smiled. "Humans have always believed in being more than the sum of our parts, Nix. Our ships simply reflect that philosophy." Nix's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "The Confederation will never be the same after this. Your tiny fleet has changed everything." "That was the idea," Miller replied, turning his gaze back to the stars. "Sometimes the greatest changes come from the most unexpected places." As the Earth ships prepared to depart the next day, a new era of galactic politics had already begun, one where size and appearance meant little, and humanity's innovative spirit had earned them a place among the stars.